Hi there, this is Marlene Dinarios here from Mi Fa Tota Musica, and that's at the Latinum Institute at Patreon. And if you want to subscribe, you're welcome to. Mostly Latin and language courses there, but also Mi Fa Tota Musica, the lost language of music made easy, talking about mainly Baroque style music tuition and creating an introductory course for improvisation for beginning music students of the type that may have been used in the conservatories in Naples by the very youngest students who were starting to learn music. Anyway, I had a thought today because I've been scratching my head for some time. Why did improvisation die out, classical improvisation? There are many, many reasons. But something dawned on me. Uh, I was listening to another of Wim Winter's talks in Authentic Sound about metronome speeds and how the tempo of music as it was played in the concert halls from the sort of early 1800s and onwards started to speed up and speed up and speed up and speed up to the extent that everyone now pretty much ignores the metronome marks. And if you analyze the performances of the great classical performers of classical music now, they're not playing the metronome marks. Even if you read the metronome marks as single beat, and it's quite clear. If you look at, for example, the instruction manual for the Maisel metronome in the London Academy of Music instruction manual, which was written as a textbook for the students of the London Academy of Music, which is now the London Academy of Music and the Dramatic Arts. And there is an extensive discussion on how to use a metronome in the textbook for this college. And it's quite clear that one beat is an oscillation, understood in the physical sense. In other words, tick, tock, not tick. And so everything is slower. Now, if performed music speeded up across the board, and it did, we know it did because there are writers who railed against this, complaining about the speed that Mozart was being played at, the speed that Beethoven was being played at. Beethoven would be horrified. I mean, the virtuosity that was displayed by these performers was amazing, but it's not what the composers had in mind. They had a much more meditative, a lot of the time, idea of what was going on. You were expected to listen to the music and understand what was going on inside it. And if it's played at a high speed, yes, it's amazing, and you're showing off, but there's no time for your brain to think about what's going on. Beethoven was a romantic composer, and his music is highly complex, beautiful, much better listened to at whole beat tempo. Now let's go back to what I was saying. If everything speeded up, that just makes improvisation impossible. You can't improvise at those speeds. It's just not possible. So even in the early 1800s, there were complaints about the speed that Mozart was being played at. Mozart was being played much too fast. So if we understand that historic performance of music was slower, then the whole exercise of improvising becomes feasible, historical improvising. So the first step to getting to grips with being able to improvise in a historically authentic style is to get to grips with historical tempi, the speed at which music was played before the Industrial Revolution, when everything just got faster and faster and faster and faster and faster. Of course, this instrument I'm playing at, the organ, kind of limits the speed that you can play at, because you cannot play an organ very, very fast effectively, especially one with an old mechanical action. And so that slows you down. So organists who still do improvise in some cultures and kept that tradition alive, one reason why they still improvise is because they can, because they haven't been captured by this rush to speed, which So if you haven't listened to any of the videos of Wim Winters talking about historical tempi, or tempi in the English pronunciation, the I recommend you do that. And there are many, many sources and source texts. Even the Encyclopedia Britannica, in its discussion of the metronome, talks about the oscillation. And if you look up the definition of oscillation, it's quite clear. I remember my physics from my high school days, and oscillation is a movement backwards and forwards. And if you were learning how to count on a pendulum when you were in physics class, it was the swing back and the swing forwards. And a metronome is nothing apart from an upside down pendulum read in the same way. There was nothing new about it, and it wasn't expected that you would suddenly read the pendulum differently. So the change happened when music moved into the concert hall and became something for public performance, displaying virtuosity, displaying your keyboard skills, all about the performer and not so much about the composer. So if you want to compose, feel comfortable playing slowly, because historical music was much slower. And look, for example, at descriptions of speed. There are some, for example, in William Tansur, in his Melody of Zion, I think it's called, 17th century text. He talks about the ticking of a grandfather clock. Tick, tock, tick, tock, as your reference point for all of the tempi. And that means if you were to follow that, you would have much slower music, and much more playable music, and music that is able to be composed in real time, as much music was before the 1800s. In the Baroque period in particular, most music was new. It was composed on the spot, or composers just roughly sketched out what they wanted and expected the performers to fill it all in. Now, at the speeds at which music is played now, there's just no time to think about that. Mozart wrote most of his music with only very rough sketches for the bass, or for filling in the chords and whatever. They were just, a lot of the time, very incomplete, expecting the performers to complete the music. You can't do that at modern speeds. If everything's written out for you and thought through and put in a score, and some academic somewhere has decided what Mozart intended and put it on paper, and then it becomes fixed, well, that's not what was done, and it was not expected to be done that way. So read about it, have a look at instruction manuals for metronomes, understand the speed at which music should be played for historical improvisation. And then, of course, you have the problem of listening to music to get your ear in. So what do you do? Because most modern performances are too fast. So you have two options. There's software available that will change the tempo of music while preserving the pitch relationships and everything like that. And you can use that to slow things down. Or you can find the few whole beat performances that exist online. There are not very many of them. Or just slow things down in general when you're listening to them. Doesn't sound that good, but it will give you an indication, at least, of what you should be aiming for, and give you time also to think about the music more carefully and to absorb it. Because if you are learning to improvise, you need to listen to an enormous amount of music, and I would even play it while you are busy improvising. So while you are improvising, or learning something that needs to be learned, like the rule of the octave or whatever, where there's lots of repetition involved, have music playing at the same time. not such a strange idea. We know in the academy in Naples, the music practice room where all the students were learning had a number of instruments in it, and they were all playing different music all at the same time in the same little room. In fact, they even slept in front of their harpsichords, and other people were playing other instruments very close by. So there was an enormous amount of cacophony of music going on. Of course, this was excellent training for playing in chaotic environments. So one reason why it's also a good idea is that it gets you used to playing in a more chaotic environment, because it's not a natural environment sitting quietly in your room. Music is social, and social environments are sometimes noisy and chaotic. People are having dinner, they are walking around, they are even chatting behind you, and you need to keep going. So distracting yourself while you're practicing is also a good idea. So that's another thing completely. So that was my thought of why it is that improvisation stopped, because improvisers couldn't keep up with these new tempi. It couldn't be done. You can't improvise at that kind of speed. And so people just gave up. They stopped doing it. That's one possible reason. There are many others, but I think that would be a contributing factor, that the speed of performed music increased. And so performers stopped improvising at concerts because they were playing everything else really fast, and so you couldn't improvise at that speed. And so you just stopped doing it.